And I remember at 5 a.m.
Some people have just finished praying.
That's when they started firing live ammo.
People start falling down.
It's like the things that we used to watch in films.
The smell of death is just in the whole place.
People say it's a massacre.
Massacre?
It was a massacre.
I'd like to share with you what happened on the massacre of June 3rd.
هات الدوشكة هات بومبانك نشن واقتل ناس اخوانك دي اوامر سيدك وحرام عصيانك ونسيت الرب الخلق السيد الخان سودانك.
On June 3rd, in the final hours of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, government forces stormed a peaceful sit-in outside the military headquarters in the Sudanese capital Khartoum. I was there in April, and back then, revolution was in full swing. Months of nationwide protests had helped topple the rule of dictator al-Bashir. A transitional military council made up mostly of his allies took over from him, but the protesters weren't happy with that. So they occupied a vast area outside of the general's offices and refused to leave until a civilian government was put in place. The sit-in was everything that al-Bashir's Sudan wasn't: unarmed, inclusive, and free. Many told me they saw in the sit-in a glimpse of what they wanted their country to become. Violence from the crackdown on the sit-in spread across the capital. Tents were burned, dozens were killed, and hundreds were injured. These 4 young protesters were on the streets that day and lived to tell what happened.
It was a makeshift morgue at the hospital.
As we were forced to leave the compound of the sit-in, I've witnessed that there were about 7 riot police officials that were actually bludgeoning someone to death.
Those who fell while they were jumping off the barricade, I really don't know what happened to them.
I can't forget the faces of the handsome boys I used to know. Last night they were very happy, talking about Eid, chanting for freedom, peace, and they have been just killed for nothing.
There's a lot of people that wanted to retaliate by going out again. They would shoot at random at people that they thought might be building barricades again, especially young men.
They killed our really good friend Matar. And they took dead bodies and they threw them in the Nile.
Eyewitnesses claim both men and women were raped in the dispersal. Others were sexually harassed as they tried to flee. But it's unclear exactly how many people were targeted. Dr. Suleyma Sharif runs a trauma center and says she's aware of at least 8 cases of rape.
Maybe people will think that because there's soldiers everywhere, they could misbehave. It's not a misbehavior, it was an order. Because it was very organized and it's done in a systematic way. It's done out of to humiliate people. It's not about sex. They did it on their genitals by their guns.
The brutality of the June 3rd crackdown marked a turning point in Sudan's revolution. It showed the protesters that while they may have ousted al-Bashir, the system he left behind remains intact and ruthless, and one key element of that system is willing to go to extremes to preserve its power.
It was the rapid support forces that terrorized us.
Rapid support forces.
Rapid support forces.
We know it's Hemedti and his militia.
The Rapid Support Forces, or RSF for short, is the paramilitary group believed to have led the violence of June 3rd. They're led by this man, General Mohamed Hamdan, simply known as Hemedti. Many consider him Sudan's de facto leader. He was part of Sudan's old guard under al-Bashir. Years ago, Hemedti was recruited to be a commander of the Janjaweed militias, which Human Rights Watch has implicated in alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity carried out in Sudan's civil war in Darfur.
We used to hear about it, that they used to murder, loot, and pillage villages in western Sudan and Darfur. And we never imagined that these things could actually happen to us in Khartoum. But they did happen to us in Khartoum.
The Janjaweed soldiers were raping women. Because again, this is what they've been trained to do. They've done this all over, they've done it in Darfur.
Years later, al-Bashir upgraded it into a paramilitary group and renamed it the Rapid Support Forces. He has used them against Sudan's people ever since. At the height of the protests in April, Hemedti abandoned al-Bashir and initially seemed sympathetic to the demonstrators. But now, he's accused of spearheading the June 3rd crackdown. Even though he has vowed to investigate what the military council has called mistakes committed during the dispersal, protesters say an investigation isn't enough.
They need to be prosecuted.
Ask for the trials for the crimes that these people have done.
No guns will be pointed at us anymore. We don't want that. We're not governed by somebody who is pointing their guns at us.
What we need is a civil is a civil government.
Protesters have told me that June 3rd is the moment that Hemedti's mask fell once and for all, and that he has no interest in sharing power with civilians because a civilian government could ultimately implicate him in al-Bashir's crimes. Meanwhile, the repression against demonstrators continues, including a block on internet access. But protesters haven't given up. They're just changing how they organize. Small protests reminiscent of the early days of the revolution in December are still popping up across the country. And Sudanese people around the world have been organizing protests to bring attention to their issue.
I don't know how we will recover from this, but we will live to fight another day. Also, we did start these protests peacefully, and that's how we will end it.
People they still have that fire. They're still fighting for freedom.
Just ignited more anger and fuel more power to keep this coming on. The revolution will never die, and nobody will go to snatch it from us.